Following up now, we have the next forum. So we shall begin with the third it's the Industrial Forum on Plantation and Forestry Sector, Strategy towards Climate Action and Being ESG Compliant. May I have the pleasure, well actually I already do, you are already seated, thank you very much, patiently waiting for the panel. May I also now ask the panelists, Ms. Elaine Chan, Head of Climate Change, Sime Darby Plantations. Dr. Geza Toth, Chief Executive Officer of Carbon Space. Then we have Puan Nurul Hassana Ahmad Hussain Malim, Head of Group Sustainability, FGV Holdings Berhad. Mr. Koo Kok Peng, Chief Sustainability Officer, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. Mr. Glenn McNair, Chief Executive Officer of Forest Solutions. And as soon as you're seated, you can get going.
Thank you very much, Maya. It's a very important topic for Malaysia in general, because if you take Malaysia's primary production, much relies on palm oil as well as the timber industry. Throughout the day, we had a lot of discussions on this particular part, but now it's actually we have the big three palm oil companies represented here, FGV Holdings, KLK, Sime Darby, represented by the Chief Sustainability Officers and also the Head of Climate Change with Eileen for Sime Darby. And not forgetting timber, I think George discussed and represents the timber industry quite a lot. And now we have actually from the upstream perspective, one of the most sustainable timber production companies in Malaysia, Forest Solutions, represented by Glenn. And last but not least, someone who's actually trying to transform the MRV, monitoring, reporting, verification settings. We are honored to have Dr. Geza joining us as well. So the flow for the panel, like the sessions in the morning, the panelists will actually take introductory remarks, 5 minutes each. And then we actually go to the Q&A session, which will also be another 30 minutes. So without further ado, to kick it off, I would like to actually invite Puan Nurul Hassana, the Head of Group Sustainability, FGV Holdings. Puan Nurul?
Yep. Thank you, Supun. I'll stand. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone. Do I still have your attention? All right. I know it's very challenging for session after lunch and after heavy panel earlier on. And here comes the plantation sector and also timber. So another heavy section. So let me introduce myself briefly. I'm Nurul Hassana, the Head of Group Sustainability for FGV Holdings Berhad. My background is not in environment, sustainability, but I'm actually legally trained. So I was with the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. I think some of you would be familiar, Suhakam, for almost 17 years. Before I made a shift to join Earthworm Foundation for a stint of over close to 1 year. I know that there are representatives from Earthworm Foundation here, formerly known as TFT. And back then I'm in charge of the palm program for Malaysia. And that's when I moved to FGV and been with FGV for 4 years now. So it's not easy, the transition from human rights to plantation, but the issues relating to ESG is not that far apart. So I believe everyone here have heard about FGV. Anyone know what FGV is? So you know that we are a plantation company. I don't know if I can tell you this, but we are not just plantation company. We are also in sugar. First time hearing it? So, pernah dengar tak gula paket hijau. MSM. So Gula Prai is also part of our group of company. And we also have logistic arm. So we have bulking facilities, we have fleet, we have lorry, we have trucks. So as the sustainability group, my portfolio covers all this business as well. But I'm standing here before you all to talk about the plantation arm only. But the policy for sustainability covers all this group as well. So in FGV, we have our group sustainability policy that is rooted under our commitment to NDPE. So no deforestation, no exploitation, no peatland development. I'm speaking to the converted. I guess everyone here knows what the NDPE is. And our commitment is also, guided by UDHR, all the conventions, and also the Environment and Climate Agenda 2050. So we have pledged to SBTI, and I am actually humbled by the earlier panel when they said that 2030 is already too late. For FGV, we just started our net zero journey 2 years ago. So I'm actually, we'll be sharing our early initiative towards net zero. So under ESG commitment, I don't have any slides, so you will have to listen to my voice and look at me. I'm sorry for that, but I think sometimes slides can distract. So just pay attention to my words. So for FGV, we have done our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission inventory. Now, the challenge is Scope 3. Because FGV plantation alone, we produce only 30% of FFB, that is the FFB fresh bunch fruit, that is from FGV. And the remaining 70% is actually from our suppliers. So we have done our Scope 1 and Scope 2 inventory for our own operation, but we are also now embarking on a long journey to get our Scope 3 emission inventory. So we have started that, hoping we will be able to complete the roadmap in Q2 next year. So that would also be areas that will be giving us a full picture on the reduction target. And for FGV, one of our challenge is, and based on our inventory, the biggest emission is, of course, Pome. And we have 66 mills. 28 of the 66 mills are equipped with biogas facilities. So, and FGV is one of the plantation company with largest biogas facilities or methane capture, But we need to do more because our commitment to the remaining 36 or more than 36 mill is still there. So we need to ensure that, methane capture facilities is equipped to all our mills. So that is on climate agenda. As we move into sustainability pillars, environment climate agenda is one. But unlike many other companies or presenters today, another area of concern for ESG under plantation company is also the component of S, that is social. And we are talking about human rights. You guys know about the issue of forced labor, child labor. Heineken talk about diversity, and I'm proud, as a woman, I'm proud to see and hear that they have actually achieved 50% diversity, which is very well an excellent achievement. But for plantation company, I'm not sure about Saimdabi. I think Saimdabi had also achieved 50%. Congratulations. But for FGV, the journey has just begun. if you're talking about women representation, and in plantation company, it's quite normal. Traditionally, it is a male-dominated industry. So our female population is very, very low still. So it's less than 16% overall in FGV operation. But this is an area that top management and board had committed to also increase women participation in FGV's operation. So that is on diversity. And human rights, forced labor issue is something that we focus on. And can you imagine, you know, environment, climate agenda is important, so as social. So when we start focusing on environment, climate agenda, working on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, suddenly we are alerted of some issues, allegation of forced labor in our operation. The attention is very diverse, and it can be a distraction sometimes and going on between environment, social, so the balance needs to be there. And that's quite a challenge. That's the reality for a company like FGV, and we are facing that. Do I still have time?
No, this is for the whole session.
Okay, so I can speak on and on and on and on, but just one key point and one key message. Whatever we are committed to under ESG, sustainability, it is also extended to our suppliers and our vendors. And imagine working with smallholders. In FGV, we source from 150,000 smallholders, scheme smallholders, and independent smallholders, and ensuring their compliance to social aspect, because the component of forced labor should not be in our supply chain. The element of no deforestation should not be in our supply chain. Validating and also gathering information is key when we work with our suppliers. And I can say here that we have actually cut quite a number of suppliers who do not comply to our NDPE commitment. I'll stop there. Thank you, Supun.
Thank you very much, Nurul. Good that you checked whether the time is actually for you or for the session. This is actually the session time. We have another 48 minutes. But sorry to disturb during your train of thoughts. But like what you said, it's actually a very complicated setting. And this is a matter that we have actually discussed in the recent PIPOC for 3 days. And before that, POC and NPOC, we have palm oil conferences year around to actually discuss on these issues, because that's of that grave importance. One thing that you missed, because FGV may be very small, but you have rubber as well.
Yes.
FGV is actually one of the largest, because rubber in Malaysia is actually a smallholder crop. Yes. More than 90% is actually smallholders, and we have a few companies like FGV who still keeps rubber and who still supports that rubber setting. And Ku from KLK also have some rubber, but from one palm oil giant to the next, I would next like to invite Mr. Ku Kok Peng, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Kuala Lumpur Kampong Berhad.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure whether Dato' Ang is still in the room. If you are, could you raise your hand? Dato' Ang from Tong Guan just now? Okay, he's not. Somebody can tell him that they are not the only product that starts with P that has bad rep. So does palm oil. And actually today, I will take a slightly different track from Nurul. I'm not so sure about Elaine later on. I'm also the alternate council member for the Malaysian Palm Oil Association, and also a newly appointed board member of the RSPO. And I feel compelled that I need to speak on behalf of the industry a little bit. So when we talk about sustainability, and in particular on climate change, we need to look at things in the right context. So if you look at palm, it actually has the lowest land footprint. And what you are seeing in the recent years also is that deforestation is on a steep decline. So if you look at the amount of land that is actually used for agriculture, pasture will command the biggest share of it. And then arable land will have the remaining roughly 30%. Out of those 30%, only about 24 million hectares are actually planted with oil palm. That is 0.5% of global agricultural land. But that 0.5% of agricultural land delivers 35% of the world's oils and fats output. Now, we are at a global population of about 8 billion, and that's going to 10 billion. And that demographic growth is still going to require food and oils and fats. And palm is very well placed to help feed the world. Not just feed the world, of course, palm does many other things, but it is in the prime position to do that. And it is inherently able to, quite simply because its yield profile is easily 5 to 8 times higher than any of the other oil-producing crops, right, as you can see on this chart. And of course, the bottom right corner of the chart is a report from the World Resource Institute, and you can see that there is a massive decline in deforestation, right? I would also like to allude to a point that Anthony Tan made just now. Are you still in the room, Anthony? I think there might be some misunderstanding because every time we see a haze coming from Indonesia, which I will just name it, it is automatically, attributed to palm. And that's actually not necessarily the case. If you look at the number of fires this year, if you go to the RSPO website, this year they have tracked about 120 over 1,000 hotspots. Can you take a guess how many of those hotspots belongs to RSPO members? Anyone? Out of the 120 over 1,000, 500 hotspots belonging to RSPO members, which goes to show that, and to be clear, a lot of us who are in Indonesia ourselves, SIME, Genting, United Plantation, most of us are RSPO members. And we go to great lengths to make sure that there's fire prevention measures. I can go on and on to tell you the different measures that we take. What I'm trying to say is, I think the next time when there's a haze or there's a fire, we have to remember that nobody wants a fire, right? And fire can happen by accident, fire can happen by malice, but I want to say that the Malaysian palm players in Indonesia take great extent to ensure that fire doesn't happen, and if they do, it is quickly put out. So I want to clear that misunderstanding. I think it's asymmetrical information flow, and it's part of the reason why this misunderstanding exists. So again, the next point is that you can't really talk about sustainability, and I'm confining this to upstream, without talking about circularity in practice in the upstream. I think George talked about the use of palm trunk. Unfortunately, in the case of KLK, we chip and pulverize the trunk and return the nutrient to the field. And after the milling process, you basically get short fibers and palm kernel shell, and we use this to fire our boilers that produces the steam for the sterilization. Empty fruit bunches goes back to the field as a form of mulching, and it's a very rich source of potassium. And that means that you use less inorganic fertilizer, which not only saves you money, but it is also organic in nature. Then you have the palm oil meal effluent, which Nurul alluded to. And in our case, we have filter belt press, which is again returned. The cake is returned to the field as nutrient. And the biogas is trapped. And again, we use it to generate power that can go back to the grid. And more, I think we are using the biogas, scrubbing it and turning it into bio-CNG. And really, I believe down the road, bio-LNG is also a possibility, considering that the world is always looking for green energy. So it is very, very circular in itself, inherently. So I'm confining this slide to basically upstream and also the climate change. Nurul has already spoken quite a bit about human rights, and perhaps my colleague from SIME will do that. But basically, there are 3 major pathways to sustainability when you look at upstream plantation. Number 1 is land use change. And I'm a smallholder kid. I grew up around rubber plantation, which became palm. live with the stench of sago because I live next to a sago factory. And, you know, a lot of the palm today that we have is actually a conversion from rubber or cocoa into palm, right? But of course, that in itself is not enough. We did deforest it in the 80s and the 90s, perhaps. So the industry, by and large, has come around to committing to NDPE and also to conservation. And the conservations are in the form of, you know, the HTS, the HTV, and the riparians that we maintain, which we don't plant with palm. The second pathway is fertilizer. I already mentioned earlier the circularity, which actually aids soil fertility. But also, more and more, with the help of agronomists, we are also ensuring that the dosing is done right, the regulatory is done right, so that the runoff is also contained. And then the third path, of course, is methane management, which is a lot of waste to health, which I've already alluded. Lastly, it is important that you do all the right things, but it is also important to disclose. And this is where all the different standards are coming in. We are working towards fulfilling the BRSA Sustainability Common Matters, as well as TCFD. And more the TNFD conversation has also picked up. Some of these things are going to come in. And communicate. I think it's important to do the right things, but it's also important to communicate so that we inform, we educate, we advocate for our industry so that there is more mutual understanding and so that we can collaborate and we can work together towards a better world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ku, for your introductory remarks. Next, let's move on to Elaine Shan, the head of climate change with another large palm oil company, Sime Darby Plantations Berhad. Elaine.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think, you know, all that has been said about the palm oil industry, what else can I add on, right, from my distinguished speakers from our industry? Okay, thanks. So, where is the slide? Am I supposed to press something for the slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on until we put it on the
Okay,
screen.
so for those who do not know Sime Darby Plantation, we're the world's largest sustainable palm oil producer. We're also fully integrated. We have over 500,000 hectares of land planted with palm oil as well as some rubber. And we have mills as well as refineries. So I think these are challenges that you see on the slide as, you know, we're all well aware. Some are negative sentiments, but I think one key thing that I would like to highlight is that the plantation industry, as what Mr. Koh has already alluded to, is that we've been doing sustainability before the word sustainability even existed, right? Many years back. So how do we at Sime Darby Plantation address the challenges that we face? Basically, we align ourselves to the Sustainable Development Goals, bucketing it to three pillars, so people, planet, prosperity. So on the people side of things, really is about how do we treat our workers, how we engage with community. So on the worker side of thing, and that's been a big thing where we had human rights and forced labor allegations towards plantation companies. How do we ensure that our recruitment processes are ethical? How do we ensure that we provide living wages and also decent living and working conditions, as well as safe working conditions to our workers? So that's on the people side of things. On the planet, really, on the environment, challenges such as climate change, biodiversity, how are we handling those things? Similar to what FGV has, we have NDPE policy. So we need to ensure that no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation by 2025 in our operations as well as our supply chain. So I think that is quite similar with the other plantation players. On climate change, we also have a net zero commitment by 2050, not so early lah. So net zero in our operations and also in our supply chain. And that's really key, similar also to what FGV said, Scope 3 is our biggest emissions. So how do we work with our suppliers and all that? So that's closely linked to the prosperity pillar where we want to replicate what we're doing in our operations to our supply chain, not just on the NDP side of things, but also on our reducing emissions, as well as one example that I can give is our renewable energy business. We ourselves are developing solar projects and also biogas projects internally, but how do we also expand that to the supply chain, to our suppliers? So those are some of the programs that we're doing. So I think on the next slide here is really focusing on the climate action part of things. The image here on the left or right, wherever you're sitting, the top key emission, and these are not signed-up-based emissions, these are from the industry. It's an LCA study that was done. So peat drainage, land use change, and POME at least account for more than 80% of our emissions. So what are some of the key opportunities for the whole industry? If we are all doing this, we can really reduce up to 80% of our emissions. Really looking at eliminating deforestation, not re-wetting peatland, for example, as one, and also look at how we can enhance our approach to land use change through reforestation and tree planting. So what SIMW has done is that we are replanting on our rubber land. So we are going to reduce our rubber plantations. So this land will be converted to forests. We are planting rare, endangered, and threatened species of forest trees on these lands. And finally, on methane capture is to reduce our emissions from palm oil mill effluents, which is the largest, one of the largest emission sources from our industry. So I think, yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Elaine. From plantations, now we move on to plantation forestry. From oil palm to timber, would like to invite Glenn McNair, the Chief Executive Officer of Forest Solutions. Glenn.
Thank you, Supan. Yeah. Hello. So thank you, Supan, for giving me this opportunity, for giving a voice to forestry. I appreciate it. I feel a little bit intimidated, as I think I'm probably one of the only forestry practitioners here, but I've got some allies. I hope that I can reassure you, some of you, and motivate others. So we'll get on to the first slide. I want to change that. Sorry. Get on to the first slide, which is to start with why I've been here nearly 3 decades in Asia doing greenfields plantations, and I believe that we are getting to the point where we have a solution. And I want to tell you that we didn't just arrive here out of the air. We came here specifically to a framework in Sabah because I believe that it is a solid framework, and I hope, I'm going to stick my neck out, but I hope that in my lifetime we recognize this as probably one of the better solutions and one of the better frameworks in the world if we implement it properly. It is more than 1 million hectares, of which most of it is fully protected, totally protected, or is sustainably managed. And we are sitting on 600,000 hectares of that area, which has been designated or highlighted for industrial tree plantations. Now, out of that 600,000 hectares, about 400,000 hectares is plantable. That's kind of a guideline and a normal guideline to developing land. Some of that land always ends up being natural forest or staying under natural forest and infrastructure. So you've got 400,000 hectares of ITP, which, if properly managed and done properly, which we intend to do, will produce 8 million cubic meters a year of sustainable homogeneous wood. Now, homogeneous in terms of size and in terms of material. And that will then allow for innovative and properly downstream industries to innovate and provide a higher value product. Now that, Mr. Tan, I assure you, won't replace that beautiful Mabao table that you are talking about, or the other products that come from rainforest. A lot of that area will still remain hopefully sustainably managed, but we are talking about the homogeneous wood that's going to come out and be a replacement to the wood that is coming out of the rainforest currently and has been in the past. So 8 million cubic meters is far more than we are producing now or have been producing in the last decade. So we go on to what that produces, and that is wood, which is, I won't go into all the characteristics of wood, we all know it's a gorgeous product. It's biodegradable, and it is versatile, and it's relatively cheap. So it's something that is a replacement to a lot of things. Particularly importantly, it's a replacement for steel and concrete in the future. A lot of the places like Finland, Singapore, and the Scandinavian countries, as a norm, have been doing multi-story buildings out of wood. So we go to the next slide, which is what does ITP mean to a place like Sabah or Sarawak, or in the case of West Malaysia, where we're doing it properly. We create a lot of jobs. Our framework will produce 80,000 jobs in the future if we implement it to the full. Most of the socio-economic benefits or the infrastructure benefits happen in the rural areas. So that's where we need it most. Particularly, I can talk for Sabah. I've been there for the last 13 years. Most of the areas we are working in are poverty-stricken. They really need this, and we've provided we're a tiny company, very small. We've got just over 400 people directly employed, and maybe the same amount indirectly employed. Most of those guys, or almost all of them, are from Sabah. All of them are from those rural areas, not only from where we work, but other rural areas throughout Sabah. So that puts also highly degraded forests. We are on marginal areas, highly degraded forests back into productive use. And so the important thing is that that area that we are putting into productive use and changing into ITP is a very, very small area in comparison with the area that you would normally use that to provide that wood from the rainforest. We need, if you take 1 million tons that you need, you know you need 50,000 hectares, but you need a hell of a lot more rainforest. So it's a very small percentage of the area in Sabah, which is less than 7%, would be ITP, but we produce more than the wood necessary to replace the tropical wood that we're utilizing now. But most importantly, at the end of the day, we are making a benefit to the economy. This will be about 12% increase in the GDP of Sabah as it is now. So, and if we do it more efficiently and we bring in the smallholders, which we hope to do in the future, it might go even up to 15% additional GDP to Sabah. So we'd have an extra leg, besides the oil and gas, palm oil industry that we've already got as a leg. Tourism industry, we'd have a new leg to stand on in Sabah, which will make a huge difference. So I would take questions after this, hopefully, or have a cocktail with one or two of you to add to this, but that's my 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Glenn, Forest Solutions is one of the very few companies who have actually achieved dual certification for both FSC and PFC for one of their units. Congratulations on that. So from timber plantations, now we go to groundbreaking tech. So I would like to invite Dr. Gesa, Chief Executive Officer of Carbon Space.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Supun. And let me start with that credit goes to you and the team, because, this conference is, if I compare to many other conferences where I've been to over the year, it's really the most impact-oriented. We talk a lot about legislations, talk about various pressures that industries face, but here we really talk about impact-oriented solutions. And this is how I want to start this short presentation too. Also, credit goes to that nobody mentioned the EUDR, or at least not extensively today, and that's really broadly discussed. But when these key regulations, the CSR, the EUDR, the carbon removal certification, we think about how the inflection point in these regulations coming closer, we also realize that much of the mainstream tools that we use today to account for carbon requires on-site sampling that are, the risk persists because of inaccuracies. The manual methods are not scalable, and self-reported data, cannot be verified. So there are over 50,000 companies subject to these regulations in the EU alone, because of the EU regulation alone, but it's not said that there is another side of the coin, that there are 50,000 low carbon business cases possible there. So this is where I want to focus. The opportunity in the measurement is that you can, you can disclose about your real impact, and you can generate sustainability premiums. In terms of disclosures, so when you have primary data, you can really start measuring your supply chain, and you can assess your supply chain. You can rank growers. You cannot do that by taking samples. If you want to identify your champion farmers, you need to compare 10,000 farmers or your own plots. And this is possible with technology. You can visit every single plantation plot. You can identify where is low carbon raw material, and with historical data, you can go back and check on the past of those fields. But similarly, you can generate carbon claims, and this is why carbon space and our primary data comes handy for the companies, both producers, processors, and manufacturers, because auditable, verifiable claims, and we need to emphasize this today, self-reported data or various calculators are not sufficient to generate claims. CSR claims, SBTI claims cannot be made by self-reported data. And our primary data helps replace regional values. And we also realize that when you really monitor the palm oil landscape, and we know this from over a dozen of examples, we see that wildlife-friendly, high biodiversity, and even zero-carbon palm oil is possible, thanks to your examples and many of the companies who are here. So in a nutshell, there are business cases that I can say on behalf of some of our customers too. Lower emission factors can generate sustainability premiums. We have examples where smallholders get 30% more revenue because they showed transparency through our data. Traders generated a premium, so the return on investment on the monitoring solution does bring an opportunity to sell the palm oil at a higher price. Buyers get investment channels into insetting, so overall, 9 out of 10 projects that we have a return on investment that is less than a year. We often talk about how this is done, so here is a few words about the technology. This is our proprietary technology. It's a fully remote-sensed approach, but we don't just use satellites to scan the surface and estimate carbon stock. We link terrestrial stations and multispectral satellite images with metadata and machine learning. I'm very happy to take your questions after that and maybe go into discussions about technology later. The important thing is that we can provide direct measurements about plantations, about ecosystem corridors, the nearby set-aside areas, and palm oil fits into a landscape where there is always forests as well. So palm oil production, it goes hand in hand in that landscape with the social and environmental implications, and of course the forests. So I will conclude there to say that obviously the verification and certification is necessary. In our approach, we've put a lot of emphasis, especially in the past 2 years, to have it peer-reviewed, to have it validated and verified. Thanks to Control Union, this was made possible. I must say it was a very rigorous process, more rigorous than I was expected, but in the end it was for our benefit. And yes, the benefit for everyone across the value chain is not only in palm oil mosaics, where you measure the ecosystem corridors along with palm oil plantations, but also for monocultures. So primary data can replace literature values. Primary data enables us to compare, for example, replanting practices. So there is a lot of opportunity in data, and there is a lot of business case that needs to be exploited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kesa, for those insights. Let's quickly move on to the question and answer session. If there are any questions from the audience, please, let's make it brief, short, and impactful, the question, so we can get the direct answers from our speakers. And if you're shy, but if you want to basically throw in questions on Slido, go to Slido, hashtag SAC 2023. You can post the questions there as well for us to actually pick up. Let me start the discussion. Okay, we have a question. Yes, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you for remembering me. I'd just like to take this opportunity to clarify my earlier statement since my name was mentioned. A minister from Indonesia stated that there was no transboundary haze originating from Indonesia, which is why I said I shall not name the country because the country did not agree. My name is Anthony Tan. I do not own Grab, although I have been mistaken for the owner. I was the executive director for the Center for Environment, Technology and Development Malaysia, SETDEM, between 2007 and 2019. During one of the terrible haze episodes in the 2010s, I was approached by a local publication and asked who is responsible for the haze. I went on record in saying that Malaysians and Singaporeans. I didn't even mention Indonesians. Of course, there was a backlash from Singaporeans. I did a search of the 3 largest plantations in Indonesia, and lo and behold, all 3 of them were listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange. Not the Malaysian Stock Exchange, not the Jakarta Stock Exchange, the Singapore Stock Exchange. So logically, ladies and gentlemen, who do you think invests in the Singapore Stock Exchange, if not Singaporeans and maybe some Malaysians?
Anthony,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was more a statement, so let's quickly go on to the questions as well. I would like to actually start with Elaine, because Sime Darby went on a kind of a roller coaster with the ethical recruitment, CBP blogs, and likewise, but we are very proud as Malaysians, Sime Darby came out triumph earlier the year, end of last year, and also, so it has taken steps above and beyond in terms of ethical recruitment and tackling forced labor. Could you share your experience with that regards, and where do you still see the impact to the industry? Is it still there? Are we clear, or is there things still to be done, and what can we learn from Sime Darby?
Okay, thanks Supun for the question. So basically when this happened, it was started in 2020 when US Customs and Border Control issued a withhold release order on the Sime Darby plantation alleging there is forced labor or that we are using forced labor in our operations. So of course, I haven't joined Sime at that time, so this is hearing from management. They went through 7 stages of grief, they call it. Starting with denial, no, this can't happen to Sime Darby, we're the world's largest producer of sustainable palm oil. We don't do forced labor. So there's denial, there was anger, how did it happen to us and all that. And finally, the last stage, there was acceptance. Finally, they accepted that we have to accept that this is something that we have to address and what are we going to do about it. So some of the top 3 strategies that Sime Darby Plantation employed was 0 recruitment fees policy on that. And also we paid back any recruitment fees that were paid by workers. So that was the first strategy. Second strategy was on the due diligence and training of contractors and recruitment agents to ensure that they are also subscribing to the same standard that we need in terms of ethical recruitment. And finally, in terms of engagement with the workers themselves, there's a lot of social dialogue that needs to happen. There were 3 grievance channels or helplines that we set up. 2 of them were independently administered by third party. And these were really to understand the concerns and the issues coming from workers and how do we resolve them. We also had worker representatives from every nationality that will have a fortnightly meeting with estate managers. So every fortnight they will talk about issues faced by the because they are the representatives, so they have to talk to understand what the issues are from the workers and present that to management and to get that resolved. So that was one of the key initiatives that happened. So all in all, I think management spent, not management, the team had spent over 500,000 man hours to address this issue. So like you said, going above and beyond and doing a lot to really review, revise, and strengthen our protocols in terms of ethical recruitment. So earlier this year, the ban has been lifted. So we are now able to import to US or export to US.
Thank you very much, Elaine. We go from there maybe to us from Nurul on the regulation aspects of it. Everyone in the palm oil industry is actually talking about EUDR. Palm, we have 40% smallholders. So this, if you take Malaysia, 16% organized, 24% organized smallholders, 16% independent smallholders. So FGV buys a lot from these smallholders. FGV supports the economy that much. We are all waiting for the Implementation Act, and is actually going to end, the transition period is going to end end of next year. How ready is FGV, and what is FGV doing in basically tackling this particular issue?
Thank you, Supun. So I believe this EUDR dichotomy is facing many plantation players, including FGV, and you rightly pointed out that we source from smallholders. And I think one of the intensified efforts that FGV had made since 2019, 2018 is to ensure our traceability work is done regimentedly and rigorously to get the data and information from our suppliers. So, and FGV refineries source only from our mills, so it's kind of easier for us in that regard to look at who we buy from. And for our traceability to plantation, we achieve 99%. But for smallholders, we are now at 97%.
Wow.
97% inclusive of scheme smallholders, FELDA. So when we note that, EUDR requirement would mean that we have to ensure there's no deforestation after 2020 in our supply chain and also in our operation, we started gathering the data from our smallholders. And the other component on EUDR is also the polygon mapping for those who are with more than 4 hectares. So we have gathered that for our scheme smallholders, but what is challenging is for the independent smallholders. And for those under 4 hectares, we just need a point, so we got it. For those beyond 4 hectares, it's a challenge right now to get the polygon mapping. I think that would continue to be a challenge. So what we have done last year, or this year rather, we have started engaging with, and we know which smallholders own more than 4 hectares. So we have started engaging with these smallholders and to educate them why we need to do this, because sometimes, working with smallholders can also mean answering questions, a lot of questions. Pasal apa we have to do this? Sorry, why do we have to do this? Well, you just buy from us. You are obliged to buy from us, being, a GLC. Yeah. So these are all the, statements that we have to work on with the smallholders. But I believe as they keep hearing about this new requirement from the government, from MPOB, from MPOC, although initially Malaysia is very, what is the lack of a better word, unreceptive of EUDR, but eventually, the reality hits in. And if we want to remain relevant for FGV, we need to do this, and this is what we are currently working on. And 2024 would be challenging to get all this information. And the other point that we are also not sure is with regard to the due diligence under EUDR, what tool, what mechanism. But what we have done is, we know that many companies are now going with NDPE IRF. That would be one area that we have been working on to gather information from our smallholders as well. For our own plantation, it's
under
safe.
Control.
Under control.
Yeah. Thank you very much,
you.
Nurul. I would like to cascade the question to Ku, because with your experience in Pramandu, with the Prime Minister's office, you actually was involved with a lot of these policy-related matters. What we also hear from the industry, the big players, because now with the regulations coming up, EU is the troublemaking market. So we see that there's a trend, companies are reassigning their supply chains in a way to basically cater to the European market, while the maybe not EUDR compliant material is actually being divested to China and South Asia. There is discussion on it. What is your assessment on the leakage efforts with the regards and KLK having a large footprint in Europe? So how are you looking into the leakage effect and the European market compliance part?
I think first thing first is we have to make a distinction between what is EUDR compliant and what is sustainable. If you are not EUDR compliant, it does not necessarily mean that you are produced unsustainably. Yeah? Because RSPO, MSPO, ISPO certified products are not necessarily EUDR compliant. And like what Nurul said, we don't know what is the mechanism. It is unclear with literally 12 more months to go. And pardon me, I have to push back on this terminology of leakage oil, right? Because it will, paint the wrong picture that what is being supplied to markets like Pakistan, India, and China are unsustainable, which is not necessarily the case. Take, for example, right? We have 20% of the global oil production, which is RSPO certified, 20%. Less, probably about 50% of those RSPO certified oil are actually taken up as RSPO certified. And the large majority of those are actually mass balanced. So, which means that there is a remaining 50% that's going to the market as non-RSPO certified. But that does not mean they are unsustainable. So what is happening is you have the people in Pakistan, India, and China receiving these oils that are basically certified, but are sold as uncertified. And I think we need to take an attitude that we need to engage with these markets and not label them as leakage market. We need to understand that these are high potential markets, huge population, China, Indonesia, India, Pakistan. I think it's a matter of educating, informing, and engaging with them to take them along in this journey. And I can tell you that China, for example, 6 weeks ago, I was in Shanghai. We have a plant in Zhangjiagang. The Chinese are dead serious about environment. You cannot believe the stringency of their pollution, mechanism and all that. And I think they're very serious. They're very serious about peaking at 2030 and going to net zero at 2060. Modi in India is on the same path. I think we need to respect that these countries are developing and they need to come along in this journey. We must not thumb our nose at them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ko. Absolutely spot on. I would like to basically, with the time at hand, I would like to basically move on to Glenn. I think it was asked in the panel before as well. Malaysia's ambitions to go for industrial tree plantations. So Sabah, Sarawak, the largest state when it comes to forest, Sarawak has actually set plans to actually establish 1 million hectares of ITP. Sabah, the other region that we have out of the three, Sabah has ambitions to actually set up 400,000 hectares of industrial tea plantations. You clearly actually justified that. But where is the land going to come from? So land are considered from the government norms as marginalized land, but if it still comes under the FAO definitions of forest, area more than half a hectare, 5 meters above ground, 30% canopy cover. So it still fits into that particular definitions, what we call forest, and that triggers the concerns on deforestation. How a company like you tackle this particular matter, because now the land is given by the government as linked for converting to ITP. We are a country with 54% of forest under forest cover, and the country has to grow. Economy has to actually move. So how are you as a company balancing this particular situation, and what is your take on the ITP development? You explain why, but how are you tackling with the deforestation concerns from your peers and the customers and likewise?
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for the questions. It's a tough question to answer. To be honest, our industry is obviously very concerned. There's a lot of uncertainty there. But what we believe is the first step, particularly in the next 3 to 5 years, and it will change as the role of us will change as we go along. But the most important thing is to, as a practitioner, do things at the right standard. So to get things, as many areas that we can, sustainable, creditized. We are PFC, FSC certified on one of our areas. We have 3 areas. The other 2 areas have this issue, where we are taking degraded areas and putting them into plantation. So there's a lot of uncertainty with where we go from here. But I think the most important thing for our industry is that what we do at the best level and the highest standard possible to create success stories. So then we can push back, because I believe that the framework that Sabah has and Sarawak is a solid one. Sabah will have almost 30% fully, totally protected areas. The rest will be sustainably managed, and then we have the small area that is ITP. So that ITP will be productive, as I said. It will produce wood that will then replace the wood from the rainforest. So that we should push back as a state and as a country, very clearly showing that we have a very, very solid framework that we can work by. And as I say, if you look at the way it's managed, the way it's enforced, the stringent and the strict conditions we are working under on all levels, not only on the operational level, but on the strategic and the certification level. I think we're working at a very high standard, and if we implement those areas properly, then we have a stance to stand back and push back on the rest of these policies. And I think it goes for all the other industries as well, including palm oil.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Dr. Geza, you were saying now with the technology at hand, you can monitor and measure biogenic removal seamlessly. This is actually one of the biggest issues what the palm oil companies are actually facing, because when the supply chain is so massive, and especially the scope 3, because if you take, I think FGV, majority comes from internal, but external crop is also massive because of the number of smallholders. If you go to a company like Apical, like 20% internal, 80% external. Musima is also 20% internal, 80% external. So when you, how is the solution gearing up to tackle these scope 3 biogenic removals?
Yes, indeed. So the traceability is a requirement, and we are going for full traceability, clear land tenures, even in the most difficult areas. And without knowing the exact location, without knowing the boundaries, one cannot measure. However, we see a lot of cases where estimates just don't solve the problem. And why to make estimates when you can have primary data? So the carbon reporting commitments are there. They will get much more rigorous. But the opportunity is to look at the existing production systems. You brought up all very good examples how you restore unproductive land, or how you convert from a rubber plantation back to nature. The role of ecosystem corridors, nearby forest areas, the connectivity doesn't necessarily reduce the productivity of the plantation. In many cases it increases, but it increases also biodiversity. It helps reduce herbicide, pesticide needs. So these are co-benefits, but the primary benefit is to be able to measure carbon, to be able to disclose that carbon, and that in a validated, verified way. I need to emphasize it over and over again, because you cannot make SBTI reduction, nationally determined contribution claims, even narrative claims, if it's not credible. So primary data is a solution there, and at scale, we need to bring this to scale.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have actually come to the end of a very productive session. Like what I said, this is a topic that we can discuss for 3 days, continuously. So there's a lot of things to actually be discussed, but these esteemed panel of speakers will actually be around. Please do connect and share these experiences. And thank you very much for all the speakers for joining in and for that inspiring conversations. Thank you very much. It was my honor to moderate.
Well, Mr. Supun, you know what to do next? Go, girl. girls.
It's very nice.
Thank you.
Hey, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Kiss.
Cheese! Okay, got it. Now I would like to ask Dr. Geza and of course Mr. Supun to stay on stage. So yet another announcement to be made that Control Union Malaysia and Carbon Space are in an exclusive partnership to elevate sustainability in Malaysian palm oil sector. Carbon Space's cutting-edge online platform, dedicated to monitoring carbon emissions in palm oil plantations across Malaysia, leverages advanced AI and satellite technology. This strategic partnership positions Carbon Space as the exclusive monitoring, reporting, and verification service provider for all palm oil carbon monitoring projects in Malaysia. Simultaneously, Control Union Malaysia assumes the role of the exclusive validation, verification, and certification service provider for these projects.